The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Tasty Minstrel Games, Game Toppers, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes review Gamelyn Games' Tiny Epic Quest. Then, in a Dukes Sextuple take, they look back at Castles of Burgundy, the card game Plums, and Burano. And finally, they talk about the little things that game publishers do that drive them absolutely crazy. And now, the Dukes of Dice.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Alex.
Without comment, this is episode 158, which we're titling The Legend of Felda. Legend of Felda, thanks to Jimmy Marrow, Jimmy DM90, decided to name that. Of course, because we're talking about Tiny Epic Quests, which is a little bit Zelda inspired, right? That type of game. And then also we've got a Feld game, Castles of Burgundy, the card game in the double take, and also Burano. If you remember back to our review, we were kind of calling a Frankenfeld because it had some Feldish? Feld-esque?
Feldish. I like Feldish.
Okay. Had some Feld-ish elements. So that works out perfectly. So good job, Jimmy, on naming that episode. And if you don't know what the heck that's all about, head on over to our Board Game Geek Guild. We're guild number 2008. Every week we put up a Dukes on Deck where we preview what we're going to be talking about that week. People can contribute, talking about the different games and also naming the episodes. So
I'm sorry, sir, did you say every week?
Oh, I'm sorry. Wow. Yes, every other week, because we're now a bi-weekly podcast as of 2 weeks ago. Habits are hard to break, Alex.
They sure are. By the way, congrats to Jimmy. He is now closing the gap on the name father, my arch nemesis and sworn rival, Steve O'Rourke. That is his 7th episode title, second only to Steve O'Rourke's 11 episode titles.
Yikes. And we didn't even have any discussion on that episode title, Alex. You were just like, boom, that's it. You started typing in the show notes, and I had no say whatsoever.
Well, now you know how it feels.
It was a Dutchy coup. What? Whatever.
Whatever.
So anyway, we'll give you the rest of the top 6 runners-up for the naming of the episode at the end of the episode. So how you doing there, buddy?
I'm doing quite well. I'm more settled in at work. Over Labor Day weekend, I was over at Empire with all y'all for Rory's big celebration and kind of an unofficial farewell. I'd already had like 3 farewells, so
yeah,
I mean, how many farewells does one guy get?
You've run out of farewells.
Yeah, I think I do. Yeah, I was there on Sunday, got in a Penske truck, drove the 15 hours from Albuquerque to St. Louis, got everything shoveled into the apartment, which I walked you through, Sean. It's here in lovely downtown St. Louis. And got back to work. And I've been working and doing a bunch of work things.
Yeah. I do a bunch of work things too, but, it's because I'm always working.
Okay. Well, you're also an attorney.
How are you adjusting to the life of a working person, Alex?
It's a little unusual, but I like the fact that it's 10 to 6 as opposed to something earlier because I like my sleep. I don't wake up so early.
You lazy millennials, man.
Well, I don't apologize for it.
Yeah. So a couple bits of show business. We've got a Patreon page over at patreon.com/Dukes of Dice. And if you want to help support the show, feel free to head on over there. We have a lot of amazing, awesome, fantastic Patreon patrons over there. And please consider that because it helps with hosting costs and review games and all sorts of stuff. Really do appreciate all our awesome supporters over there. But Alex, let's talk about some board games, shall we?
Hey, I like it. Let's do it.
Cool. Well, I'm going to start off, and not so much about games that I've been playing, but this has been an interesting week of receiving games. I got two packages, unbeknownst to me that these would be arriving. First, from Stonemaier Games, I got a copy of Scythe, the Wind Gambit expansion. This is the new expansion that has the flying ships, the dirigibles, zeppelins, whatever you want to call them. And guess what, Alex? This is not out until December 5th. So this is an early...
How did you get one of those?
I have no idea. Literally just showed up. I had no idea this was coming. I am super excited. Maybe I did ask for it. Wait, maybe I asked for it. Now I'm forgetting. I'm just gonna assume I didn't ask for it, and Jamie just was like, "Hey, here you go." Wait, I think I did. Okay, never mind.
This is very exciting stuff.
Yeah, I know.
This is great podcasting right here.
So I'm excited for that. I'll probably do an unboxing video of it just so you can see everything. And then I am pretty sure I'm going to get this to the table next Wednesday. So you'll be able to hear all about it on the next episode, more than likely. And then another mystery package arrived, and it was a box full of everything Champions of Midgard from, I forget the name of the publisher. Who does that again?
Gray Fox Games.
Oh, sorry. Yes, from Gray Fox Games, your new employer. So our buddy Josh, your coworker Josh, is he your boss, or is just Shane your boss? Is Josh your boss?
I think they're both kind of my boss.
Okay.
But Shane is officially, I think, more my boss.
Okay. All right. So it was kind of an apology for stealing Alex away from Albuquerque. So it was Champions of Midgard, the big expansion box, a bunch of the exclusive stuff. So really cool. Very much looking forward to getting that all to the table. And I guess just a nice way to say, hey, sorry for stealing Alex and making you guys go bi-weekly and all that stuff.
By the way, let's be clear, we were going to go bi-weekly anyway.
Well,
second of all, the cool thread between both of those is both of those packages came from St. Louis, Missouri.
They sure did. So I guess there's some good you being in St. Louis after all.
Oh, yeah. Look, I have yet to actually meet up with any of the gaming meetup folks, but the gaming meetup group out here is gigantic. Thousands of people in size, several weekly events in different places. I haven't been to one of them yet, but I'm excited to go to one of them.
Okay.
So, yeah, super stoked. Super stoked.
Very cool.
So cool. Very cool. Well, speaking of Jamie Stegmaier, I was at his game night, and that's sort of been my regular Wednesday night thing.
Sorry, go ahead.
What are you laughing about?
I don't know. Just the casual way you dropped the name. Like, I'm dropping names, right? But the way you did it, it was very nice. Well done. Go on. Speaking of Jamie Stegmaier, continue.
Fantastic. I was at his game night, which he hosts on Wednesday, so it's sort of a nice transition. It sort of filled the gap a little bit from the Dukes weekly game night. And the other week, I got in a play of Pursuit of Happiness from Stronghold Games. Sean, have you heard of this one? Any experience with this one?
Yeah, I played it at BGG 2 years ago.
So this was my first experience with the game. I had heard of it and been interested in it. And the best way I can describe this is it's like life, but actually good. None of the mechanics are anything like life. What I like about it, though, is you are building your life over the course of the game. You are trying to find relationships, maybe get a job, buy stuff, pick up hobbies, and advance different things as a result of that. It's effectively a worker placement, resource management type of game. I think that's the best way of describing it.
Yeah, that's fair.
In this game, I was at one point a disco dancing flutist. I don't know which one it is. Megan Naxter could probably answer that properly. Any case, I was a paid musician who was good at disco dancing and some other stuff, and then got into a relationship with Cameron. Cameron was who I was in a relationship with. Not the Cameron from Wednesdays at Dukes, but just, yeah, Cameron. Anyway, Cameron and I took things to the next level when I was in sort of my middle ages. Not the Middle Ages, just my middle age. Man, I am not describing this thing well.
Boy.
Oh boy, howdy. We had a lot of fun with this one, Sean, and so the art style of it is a little off-putting to me. I didn't dig the art look of this game. I got what it was going for, but it didn't draw me in as much as I would have liked. That being said, the thematic fun and sort of the stories that you tell over the course of this were a lot of fun. The game ends when everyone dies. It's literally like late teens to death. And your character dies when they get too stressed out from doing different things, either working too many jobs or trying to carry on 2 relationships at the same time or just old age. Any combo of those things could potentially kill your character. There's things you could do to try and make them healthier, but some of those are few and far between. In any case, the thematic fun of this one really sold it for me. They did a great job on these individual cards, kind of mocking either board games or video games or different things. That's right. I owned a mini golf course. That was the thing. I was a mini golf course owning musician. So that was my path in life in that game. And it ended up being a winning one, Sean. So that's Pursuit of Happiness. If you haven't given this one a try, either from the look or it just never got on your radar, give it a shot, especially if you like those kind of thematic games that can add a little bit of story to them.
Counterpoint, don't give it a shot. Oh!
What?
Shots fired. It's fine.
Okay.
I don't know.
And that's code, as everyone knows, for don't play it.
It's fine.
From Sean.
It's fine.
Great. Excellent.
It's fine. Yeah, I played the Artipia version before Stronghold brought it over. I think it was Artipia. I'm pretty sure it was Artipia. Yeah, but it was fine. It was fine. Anyway, moving on. I got, another game that got sent to us. And now, man, the Ducal Wii is just changing all the time. So we got a copy of BONK, and this is from Compito/Marketoy. And these are the same people that brought you Clask. Clask is kind of like it's kind of like a table wooden hockey game-ish type thing. And BONK, which is only available in Target. So if you want to check this out, you can go check it out at Target. Also a sponsor of the show. Not really.
Nope.
So BONK reminded me a little bit of Team Crossfire.
Crossfire. You get caught up in the crossfire. Crossfire. Crossfire.
Yeah, waiting for that. Was waiting for that to happen. So instead of having this one little, it's kind of like a disc, right? Little disc thing that you have. Instead, you have this nice wooden ball, and there are 12 of these ball bearings, and you're supposed to give 3 to each player. So it should be 2-on-2. You can play it. You can play it with 2 players. I think it's really designed for 4 players because it's really difficult at 1. And the board itself is kind of sloped. So, or it's I guess convex, right? So the top middle where the ball rests is kind of flat, but then it curves towards the goals on either side. And the goals are these little channels in the middle of each of the 2 players on a team. And you're able to take these little wooden slides and you put the ball bearing down the slide, and you're just trying to knock the ball into the opponent's goal. Now, at first, it seems like super easy. Because it seems really difficult because there's very little time for the ball to go from the starting position to one of the side's goals. But as you get better at the game, and as you learn some of the angles and some of the trick shots, because there are some trick shots in this game, but you've got to be really quick. Once you learn it, there's a little bit more of a duel here. Like I said, I've played it 2 players. It's way too hard controlling two different ramps. Much easier with 4 players. This was really cool. In fact, I am regretting I was going to bring it Sunday when you were here so that you could play it, because that would have been cool. I think you would have liked it.
Great. Well, thanks.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome. Well, next time you're here, which will probably be a couple months or something.
Yeah, maybe around Christmas.
Yeah. So anyway, that is BONK, which you can go find at Target right now.
Very cool. Sean, you and I got in a bunch of games together on Sunday, though. Not BONK, but several others. And one of them was our first taste of Scott Pilgrim's precious little card game from Renegade Games Studios. I was at their booth at Gen Con. I did not play or learn this one at all. Luckily, our good buddy Grumpy Man Matthew, one of the Wham Boys, taught us the rules and got us going. And boy, this thing is more complicated than you would think looking at the art on the box. Just because I'm not so familiar with Scott Pilgrim, but this is a fairly beefy little game, Sean.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it was pretty interesting. I think the big thing here is that the cards are double-sided, right? One side is your purchase power, the other side is your combat power. And I think that this is really aimed towards fans of the IP, whether it's the movie or it's the graphic novel. But it did some really interesting things. I mean, the double-sided cards alone were pretty interesting. And you're actually drawing 2 hands. You draw one initial hand, which is your buy. Once you complete your buy, you can then draw another hand, which is for combat. And basically, as the IP goes, you're trying to defeat Ramona's evil ex-boyfriends. Or evil exes, because I think there's a girlfriend in there. The evil exes, and so there's some variability because you'll have a different evil ex in each game, and it has some different effects on the rules. There's the ability to battle the evil ex, which can give you some victory points, and basically it's a race to get to a certain amount of victory points. What's also cool is it uses waste cards. A lot of deck builders have these waste cards. This game has them. It's called Drama. So they kind of clog up your hand, but some of your cards key off of waste cards. So they'll say, if you have a waste card, then pair it with this card and you'll get +1 buy. So it was certainly interesting. The buys, there are 3 or 4 different currencies? I'm blanking on the number.
Oh boy. Let's see. There's guitar picks, there's hearts, and there's something else.
Gears.
There's at least, I think there's 3.
Gears.
I think it's just 3.
Yeah, it's the 3. So definitely interesting. I think that it is certainly more rewarding for people who are fans of the IP. I've seen the movie. I enjoyed the movie, but I wouldn't consider myself necessarily a big fan of the IP. Had you seen the movie, Alex?
I have not had any experience at all with the Scott Pilgrim franchise, movie, manga, take your pick.
Okay. So yeah, it was okay for me. I enjoyed what it did, and I enjoyed the little nuances that kind of set this apart from other deck builders. But I think it's really aimed at fans of the IP. What about you?
Yeah, I think it is aimed there too, though it is meant to be a serious game, and there's certainly a beefy game. I'm trying to remember the designer of this, Sean. I don't know if you remember him offhand, but he's done some other stuff that's of a pretty significant nature. And
then the other thing too, and this is because you were just saying that it basically feels like a pretty meaty game, and it's because there are a lot of different decision points, and that was a little overwhelming at first.
Oh yeah, decision points and a good amount of planning too.
Right. And by the way, it's Keith Baker is the designer, and he actually designed Gloom. He designed Cthulhu Flux and Cthulhu Gloom. He also had some hands, it looks like, in Descent, some of the expansions and stuff. So he definitely has gotten around in board game design. No doubt about it. Yeah, and what's interesting to me about this one is, from my experience, I would put this closer to at least a 2.5, if not a 3, in terms of the BGG weight, which goes from 1 to 5. This one's listed as a 2 on the complexity scale, which to me seems a little low for at least what I was experiencing with it. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I don't think the rules complexity was too bad, but with all of the decision points, all the different decision trees, because there's options, there's basically like two decks of cards that fill in the supply. They call it the plot line, where you're able to purchase or fight other cards. So the cards can come from either one of those, and then you have an option to discard one or both of the top cards. And then you've got, front and backs of cards to worry about. There's a little bit of a memory aspect, because when a card is face down in the plot line, the cards you can purchase or fight, you can't look at the backside, but there are abilities that might let you peek, and so you have to kind of remember. There are times when you can flip a card in the buy row. So it was a bit overwhelming. So I'd agree. I think 2 is probably underselling it a little bit in terms of weight. So anyway, that's Scott Pilgrim's precious little card game. I don't know if I'm necessarily going to seek this one out to get more plays in, but it definitely has some interesting things going, and I think for fans of the IP, this one's going to be a definite hit. Yeah, I'd agree with that for sure. So Alex. Yes, Sean. Let's say I told you the name of a designer. Mm-hmm. Hisashi Hayashi. Okay. And let's say I told you that the object of the game was to take these cards that had these 6 little terrain boxes and arrange them in a certain way to score points, arrange them and orient them in different ways. What game would I be talking about? Did he do Honshu? Yes, he did do Honshu. Okay, yeah, I would think of Honshu. Yes. Okay. Well, I'm not talking about Honshu. Instead, I'm talking about Samurai Gardener from Osprey. This game was originally titled Edo Yoshiki, and it's designed by Hisashi Hayashi. But instead of the kind of trick-taking-ish mechanism to get your cards, it is speed Honshu. You are laying out a bunch of cards, and then all at once, you're slapping your hand on the card that you want. Oh, man. What do you think? How's that sound? I don't know. I don't know. That's interesting. It's an interesting twist on the mechanic. Yeah. And actually, my understanding is this game predates Honshu. It's just been picked up by Osprey and re-released as Samurai Gardener. The scoring is different. So in Honshu, you're basically scoring these different terrain types in different ways. It depends, if you have several lakes adjacent, you're going to get a certain number of points. Your biggest city is worth a certain number of points. In Samurai Gardener, you're building a garden, and you can only orient the cards vertically. So you can't actually turn them sideways or anything. So only vertical orientation. And then you want to try and get columns or rows of the same terrain type. 3 of them is worth like a point, and then I think 4 in a row is worth like 2 or 3 points. And at a certain point, you're scoring a bunch of points if there's like 4 or 5 in a row. But once that's 6 in a row, you actually are going to score no points for it. And there's this interesting way that you are scoring points for each of the 4 different terrain types. When you score one of the terrain types, you flip over this tile that you have to show that you're not eligible to score it until you've scored all of the other terrain types. Then you get to flip them back over. So if I'm able to score the paths and their size 3, once I'm able to flip everything back over, I can be adding on to my paths. Now I'm scoring at size 4 or size 5. And the more things that you can score at a single time, you're going to get some bonuses for. It was interesting. We played it at 5, and I think that was a little bit hectic. Also, we were playing on a rectangular table. I think this is really meant for, a round table at 5, or if you've got at least 4 or 3, you might be fine with a squarish table. I'm interested to play this more. I like the speed aspect, but also the scoring was a little bit different than some of the other types of games like this. So definitely worth checking out. Was a review copy from Osprey. It's not available yet here in the US. It's going to be available sometime in early October. So definitely keep an eye out for that Samurai Gardener from Osprey Games.
Awesome. All right. I got another play, of a game that I was pretty sure you were going to like, Sean. As soon as I played this, I thought, yeah, this is definitely a Sean kind of game. And that is Valleta. I talked about this one. Mike Fitzgerald first taught me this one up in Colorado. And it takes you to Malta, where you are basically working through the town, building a deck, adding buildings to the board, upgrading the buildings, and trying to score the most points. Sean, I thought you were going to really dig this. Was I right?
You were so right. Valleta is incredible. It is really good. It is a light deck builder, kind of like Eldorado, Race to Eldorado. What's the full name of Eldorado? The
I'll knock Eldorado,
or the English version, either one. So I like that both of them have this kind of lighter deck building where you're actually doing stuff. So here you're deck building to do some resource management, which is going to let you build certain buildings, which give you new cards to add to your deck with new abilities. It was really solid. We played it at 4 players. I feel like I'm going to enjoy this a lot more at 3 and probably find this absolutely ideal at 2. I think that this is just really good. It's definitely going to be a very strong contender for top 10 games of the year because it's that good.
And by the way, it's one that's a contender for my top 10 games of the year as well. It's right there with, and I'm only mentioning these two in the same sentence because they came from the same company, but it's right up there with First Class in terms of one of those that just grabbed me right off the bat as this works really well mechanically. And I enjoyed it on the second play just about as much as on the first. The only thing that made it a little stressful was Matthew being a little freaked out because it got pretty crowded in Empire at the time we were playing it. Because Rory was having free sandwiches and drinks day in celebration. I think the whole store basically got rented out by one of the non-pill business groups there. So yeah, really cool event, by the way. Rory had tables outside. All of those were filled. You had Extra Life starting to raise money out there for that. And it all was fantastic.
And then, go real quick, going back to Valleta, it's designed by Stefan Dora, who did For Sale, which is a fantastic game. Also, Medina. Have you played Medina, Alex? You're building the city of Medina with these really cool chunky blocks. Stronghold re-released it like 2 years ago. You would remember.
I don't think I've actually played it.
It's really cool. I think he's a fantastic designer, and Valleta just was firing on all cylinders for me. It was really good. Did I win that game?
Did you win what game?
Valleta. No, I didn't. I came in, I don't remember. Not important.
Okay.
No, well, Matthew won. Matthew won.
Oh, yeah, he won by a point.
I came in 3rd.
Or by two or 3 points. Anyway, okay, that's what you meant. Yes, Matthew won that game. Sorry, I thought you mean, did you win a copy of the game for some reason?
No. Yeah, I just looked it up on the board game app. Board game tracker. Board game stats.
Board game stats?
There we go. Board game stats app.
Excellent. So that's Valleta. It's a strong recommendation from both Dukes to at the very least check this one out.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, the last game I want to talk about is Space Race, the card game. This is designed by Marek Loskut and Jan Sukol. And I'm not sure exactly. It says it's published by Boardcubator. And I don't know if that's kind of like a service that lets you kind of self-publish games. I'm not entirely sure. This was a really interesting tableau building game that is a space race theme. And all of the different decks, the different player decks, are different space agencies. So there's the Russians or the Soviet Union and Americans, and then there's also like private companies. So that's a little bit anachronistic, but it's really cool. Everyone starts with a hand of, I guess for lack of a better word, action selection cards. And based on, so there's 4 different colored actions, and within each of those colors, there are 3 different levels of priority. So what you'll do is you'll select one of those cards from your hand, and once you select that card, you're not really using that card again for the rest of the game. And you'll reveal them simultaneously, and then based on color priority, there's a little chart that tells you which one goes first, and then based on number priority within those colors, you're going to get to select from the universe. The universe is a bunch of cards face up in the center. Think of like the floor from Motainai. Oh yeah, that's really good. Let me explain a kind of complicated tableau builder by referring to another super complicated tableau builder.
Nice. Well done.
Anyway, so you grab these, and then you grab the cards from the universe, you put them in your tableau, and then you may or may not be able to kind of run your engine depending on what card you played, because these cards are going to have certain things that may or may not fire depending on those card colors. And so there's a little bit of engine building there because you want to kind of collect some of the same color cards. There's some research where you're putting things in a science lab because there are cards that play in your science lab that either are going to score you points there or going to let you take them out of the science lab directly into your tableau. This was really confusing. This was a really confusing game. I understood the mechanics. I was doing things. Towards the end, I kind of figured out what I was doing. But this was kind of like a first play of a Motainai, where it's like, okay, I think I get it, and I don't know necessarily how well I was doing as the game was going. So first play was rough. However, I think there's something really solid here once you've had a couple plays, just like Motainai. There are certainly some games that you need to give a chance to. And I know there's an argument, there's so many amazing games out there that you don't have time to waste on that. But I disagree. I really think that there are some hidden gems. And I don't know that this is one, right? But I'm willing to give it a couple more plays now that I understand the intricacies of it better, if that makes sense. I mean, imagine if I'd given up on Motainai on my first or second play. It's my number 4 game, number 3 game of all time.
I don't know where you put it. Yeah, something up there.
I mean, that would be a huge loss, right? So, this was interesting. This is Space Race, the card game. Definitely worth checking out if you like kind of, a 30, 40-minute card game, maybe less, that isn't quite crystal clear on what you're supposed to be doing. If you want to kind of tease out the intricacies of the game, this is a good one to check out. So I would definitely recommend the Space Race, the card game, for certain types of people.
All right, fair enough. That's what we've been playing. Let's head on over to the news desk. First up in news, an interesting kind of PR situation almost happened with Z-Man Games, who, for folks who don't know, is the publisher of Pandemic. And for anyone who didn't know about this happened within the last week from when we recorded this. This was Z-Man announcing that Pandemic Rising Tide was coming out. It's a new edition of Pandemic where you are going to be in the Netherlands battling floodwaters, doing your best to build dikes, to control water flow, work cooperatively to basically keep things from flooding. The trick was, when they announced it, it was right in the peak, right at kind of the maximum point of Hurricane Harvey. And there was some concern that the timing of that announcement looked incredibly insensitive. Was this intentional? I doubt it was.
Well, yeah.
I think it was just something that we hit the send button on something, announced the game, and oh man, this doesn't look good. Now, to Z-Man's credit, they realized this, and they made a very cool move to rectify the situation. What they did was they pulled down the announcement initially, and then a few days later, they posted that, hey, we're really sorry about all this. For every pre-order we get of this game, we will donate $5 to hurricane relief efforts. I thought that was really, really cool of Z-Man. A really cool way of turning things around.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was certainly an oversight on their part. I think that, this was probably planned weeks in advance, this press release, and all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, the optics on that are just really, really not good. And by the way, we should mention, while we're recording this, Irma has already devastated parts of the Caribbean. It's on its way to Florida. So, and I've seen on, Facebook, people in Florida, people in Texas, board gamers talking about how it's affected them. And, certainly, thoughts, prayers, all of that goes out to all of, the board gaming community in those areas, everyone in those areas, really. But, I appreciate that Z-Man had the sense to say, yeah, this doesn't look right. Real quick though, I will mention what's kind of surprising about this game, which, had it not been for one of the co-designers, I probably would have just looked right past this game. I would have had no interest in it. I wasn't a fan of Pandemic Iberia, but this is co-designed by Jurin Doman, who is one of the designers over at Splotter. So knowing, Alex, that this is co-designed by someone that did Food Chain Magnates, do you have any interest in playing this now?
No, I actually have less interest in it now. Oh.
Well, I mean, I don't think it's going to be of a Splotter weight, certainly, but it's interesting that they kind of tapped him to co-design a pandemic game. I think that's really interesting, and that makes me really interested in the mechanics of this game. So,
and it's interesting to view this now from the lens of a publisher more, Sean, because I can imagine absolutely something happening where you have a release announcement planned, or you're ready to put a game up on pre-order, and whoops, the timing wasn't right. But, I was telling you this story before we started recording. We just finished running a naming contest for our Harvest Ice Pig. Sorry for the shills here, but the story connects. The most commonly suggested name for the Harvest Ice Pig, not out of insensitivity, I should add, was Harvey the Harvest Ice Pig. And we didn't go with that name, I think for obvious reasons, but it shows you that even something that can seem innocent in the wrong context, it doesn't fly. Ultimately, by the way, we went with Pip the Pig. Congrats to Scott Duvall, one of our listeners, on that. Anyway, what I'm saying is it's a consideration that you try to have with this kind of thing, but things are going to happen. And I think as I get more and more into this industry, I'm hoping I never do, but it's a strong possibility I'll have my own moment like that. And hopefully, if that ever comes, I'll be able to handle it as gracefully as Z-Man did, because I think they did a great job in bouncing back from what could have been a tricky situation.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Next up, let's go right over to our Kickstarter of the week. We tend to do one of these a week. And Sean, I have put in something that fulfills our occasionally role-playing game section of the Dukes of Dice.
I don't know that it does, but go on.
Well, it kind of does.
Well... You should not be allowed to pick the Kickstarters, but go on, Alex.
You don't like this one?
By the way, Rodney Smith is running a wonderful Indiegogo campaign for the newest season of Watch It Played. But go on. Let's tell everyone, Alex, about Critical Fit.
Critical Fit, look, I tend to like things that are really interesting or odd or unusual. And so I will describe Critical Fit. Critical Fit is... I'm going to lose this. Critical Fit is a fitness program with elements of classic tabletop role-playing games. In it, you'll learn how to create a character with attributes that represent your real-life athletic abilities, how to improve those attributes with specialized training programs, and how to go on quests to test and show off your new abilities. There are several phases to the program, including the starting role, campaign, and quest. Basically, what you're going to do is take a bunch of fitness tests, see where you're at, create a character that has those characteristics. So you are the character. Then the book is going to give you a workout plan designed to help improve those stats, and you're going to try and work and improve those stats and level up. There are 5 different classes that you can play as, so to speak. There's Fighter, which is more functional movements. There's Barbarian, which basically has to do with lifting heavy weights or lifting heavier things. You have a Ranger, which tends to be more endurance, long-distance running. Rogue, which is about agility and dexterity, and then Druid, which is more kind of the yoga, flexibility, body control kind of thing. Sean, I saw this and I thought, man, this is a really cool way of blending these two worlds. What did you think?
I thought this looks like a pretty rookie Kickstarter campaign. It's this guy's first Kickstarter. There are no pictures. There's no assets to speak of whatsoever. It is just a bare bones. I mean, we're talking like maybe 600 words, maybe 1,000 words tops. Yeah. So that's a little concerning.
What do you think of the idea?
Yeah, if it were better implemented, and I mean, it sounds like more like this would be a better app or something. I don't know. Here's what it says in the goals, Alex. It says, we're looking to raise $3,000 to print the book and produce additional materials such as polyhedral dice and hand-painted dice carriers. These products require additional materials such as plastic for the 3D printer and painting materials. The money will also be used to distribute these goods to our backers and increase our reach in marketing and promotion at local conventions.
I like fighting for the little guy, Sean.
Well, yes. This is as little guy as it gets. Oh!
Currently 87 backers. Its campaign is going to wrap up September 22nd. If you think it's a cool idea and you want to support awesome, interesting ideas like this one, you can go find it on Kickstarter. Sean isn't going to do it.
This guy might have 87 cousins. That's my guess. I bet you if we did the math, first and second cousins, 80.
What did this guy do to you? This is brutal.
He put up a bad Kickstarter. You put up a bad Kickstarter, you're going to get mocked. That's it. That's it.
I'm sorry to the guy that I pulled this in. Oh, I apologize on Sean's behalf. If you want to pledge for the digital version of it, it's $15.
And when you say digital version, you don't mean an app, you mean a PDF file.
Yes, that's what it says.
Which is fine from an RPG standpoint, but anyway, yeah.
$20 gets you a hard copy of the book. All right. Campaign wraps up September 22nd. It hasn't met its funding goal yet of $3,000. It's at $2,500. Oh, okay. Fine, Sean. I see how it is.
Yeah, go
back Rodney Smith.
This.
Go support Rodney Smith.
Yeah, go support Rodney Smith. Spend your money to support Rodney Smith, who makes amazing board game videos.
Excellent. Hey, Sean, there's some other big news in the Dukes.
Yeah, sure is. So instead of being bi-weekly, we decided to go once a month. No. Don't
you start this here. Not accurate.
No, just kidding. So there is a board game tournament that is being ran. There's actually all of these satellite events that have been occurring all over the country for the last couple months. And there's going to be a culmination, a grand tournament. The finals are going to be held in beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada, October 27th, 28th, and 29th at Bally's. Now, there are still 2 satellite events that you can go check out. On September 16th, if you're anywhere near Schaumburg, Illinois. Is that correct? Schaumburg?
That's what you wrote in there.
Well, I know, but the pronunciation of it, Alex.
Oh, I don't. Schaumburg? I don't know.
All right. September 16th, Schaumburg, Illinois, or September 23rd, if you're anywhere near Minneapolis, Minnesota, you can pay $10 to get into one of these tournaments. And there's several games that they're running tournaments for. They're running them for Ascension, Munchkin, Nevermore, King of Tokyo, Epic Spell Wars, and Villagers and Villains.
Now, why are we talking about this, Sean? Why are we talking about this tournament?
Well, Alex, you and I are going to be, their words, VIP guests, not our words, VIPs at the finals in Vegas. They're going to be bringing us out to Vegas, and we're going to be there. We're going to be playing some games. So you can actually watch this streaming on oomba.tv. That's OOMBA.tv. And what's really cool is the finals themselves are going to be hosted by Will Wheaton, who I think he has some board game involvement or something. I don't know. But yeah, the host of Tabletop. So that's going to be pretty cool. I'm not sure. Are we going to get to hang out with Will Wheaton?
I don't know. We'll find out.
So here's the thing. I'm going to want to say, shut up, Wesley, at some point. If it sounds like that's about to happen, I need you to tackle me, because I'm sure he probably does not want to hear that and is sick and tired of hearing that. So there's nothing finalized yet. There may or may not be some contest that Unrivaled's going to be putting together fairly soon, a social media contest that will give you a chance to play a game out there in Las Vegas with the Dukes, a game of King of Tokyo, Alex.
Oh.
Better stay away from
like a good one to play.
From my Kong. Or is it the King? It's the King.
You play whoever you want. I'll take whatever's left over. I'm used to that because you'll usually hog green first. By the way, you know what would blow me away, Sean?
What's that?
If we do meet Will Wheaton and he's like, oh, he recognizes us, he recognizes you, and then he's like, oh yeah, and you're Alex, your favorite game is Baseball Highlights 2045, first mention.
I doubt that will happen.
That would blow me away if that did happen.
Well, yeah, sure, why not? But so definitely go check out those satellite tournaments, September 16th, Schaumburg, Illinois, September 23rd, Minneapolis, Minnesota, and get a chance to go out to beautiful Las Vegas last weekend in October. I'm looking forward to that. It's been a while since I've been to Vegas. I'm ready to win my fortune playing craps, Alex, afterwards. After the tournament.
Not blackjack? We're not going to do blackjack?
Well, no, you get a little bank playing blackjack, and then you take that bank and then you parlay it in craps. I'll teach you how to play craps, Alex.
I don't know if I want to learn, actually.
You would call it convoluted.
Maybe I would. All right, that's the Unrivaled Tournament series. That's the Unrivaled Tournament series, and that is a look at the news.
I'll be honest with everyone out there, I'm a little sad to see the Dukes of Dice going from a weekly podcast to a bi-weekly podcast, but that's okay, because there are a lot of amazing other board gaming podcasts. And with all the free time you now have not listening to a Dukes of Dice every single week, maybe you should check out the Tasty Minstrel Games podcast. The TMG podcast is hosted by the undead Viking himself, Lance Mixter. It comes out about every week and it packs quite a punch for a 30-minute podcast. So nice, short, to the point. There's a lot of behind-the-scenes discussion from Lance, from Michael Mendez, the CEO of Tasty Minstrel Games. They bring on a bunch of industry insiders. It's a great peek behind the curtain, so to speak, into the board gaming industry. Just in the last month, there's been Gen Con discussion. Lance has had Joel Eddy onto the podcast. Lots of cool stuff here. A fantastic inside board gaming podcast. So you can find that where all great podcasts are found, iTunes, Stitcher, that whole deal. Also, be sure to check out all of Tasty Minstrel's amazing games over at playtmg.com. They had a fantastic initial release of hot new games at Gen Con, including Jiraku and Okie Dokie. Plus, they have their amazing catalog. Playtmg.com has all the information you need to find some amazing board games. So be sure to check out playtmg.com and the TMG podcast.
It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. We're talking Tiny Epic Quest this week, the latest in the Tiny Epic series. We'll tell you if it stacks up with the rest.
Tiny Epic Quest is published by Gamelyn Games. It's designed by Scott Alms, the designer of all of the Tiny Epic games. Has art by Miguel Coimbra, Adam P. McIver, and Benjamin Schulman. Now, this Tiny Epic series is supposed to be a bunch of game packed in a little tiny box. So tiny is for the size, epic is for how much gameplay you're getting. And this certainly lives up to that. So in this game, it's kind of drawing on maybe some of the classic NES games like Zelda, where you're an adventurer that is going on different quests, trying to find magical artifacts, things like that. In this game, you actually have 3 different heroes that you are moving around this modular map. The different cards have 2 spaces on each card, and you're going to arrange them in a sort of pre-configured way, although it's random, so it'll be different from game to game. And you're going to take turns moving your heroes, and then there's a press your luck element where you're trying to complete certain quests, where you're trying to delve deeper and deeper into these temples, learn some new spells, and all sorts of stuff. So you set up on a castle. Everyone has their own castle that are kind of equidistant from one another near the center of the board. And in the day phase, everyone's going to get to do 4 movements that they can split up among their 3 adventurers how they want. Now, you're going to kind of go around the table. There are 5 different types of movement. So there's moving by foot, for example, which lets you just move one card in any direction. There's movement by coast that lets you move anywhere from one space on the edge of the board to another space on the edge of the board. And there's several others. But what's interesting is as I pick, say I'm first player, and I say, okay, we're going to all move by griffin, which is diagonally as many cards as we want. I do that, and then everyone else in turn order gets a chance to do that. And then the next player gets to pick a movement type, and we all get to do that. Ultimately, possibly getting 4 movement points, although you can even choose to rest and not take a movement to regain some power or health, which I'll explain in a second. Now, during the night phase, once everyone's done with their movement, you're going to be rolling some dice to various effects. And it's kind of dependent on where you wound up in your movement. So if you wound up on different temples, you're looking for either these scroll icons or these torch icons, depending on the temple, which are going to let you advance along these different temple tracks, and you're trying to get to the end. And it gets a little bit harder as you move down the temple. If you wound up in a goblin pit, you're trying to fight these goblins that are just all over the place. You're looking for the attack symbol, which is going to do damage, and you have to wipe out goblin. I think it's 5 or 6 points of damage that you have to do.
I think it's 5 each, yeah.
5 each, yeah. So you're looking for that. Now, that's all well and good, but the problem is, as you're rolling, it's possible that the dice are going to deal some damage to you. It's also possible that the dice are going to give you some power, and the difficulty could increase if you roll these mushrooms, because there's a separate mushroom track, which as it goes up, certain damage dice are going to become more dangerous. Eventually, the power symbols are turned off, so you're unable to continue to gain power. And it uses a really interesting mechanic where you're going to pass the dice around. If I'm the first player, I'm going to roll the dice. If there is a single attack, it's going to deal damage to me. If there's 2 attacks, the first one's going to deal damage to me, and then the second one will go to the next player in turn order. And if there's 3, it goes then to the third person, and so on. However, the fighting a goblin, the scroll, and the torch symbols are all communal and can be used by everybody. So essentially, you're trying to increase on these temple tracks. You're trying to wind up in these obelisk spots, which is where you're going to learn some spells, because there's also the spell track, which is worth some endgame scoring points. And then, of course, there's the goblin pits that we already talked about. Now, the way that you're primarily scoring points is by increasing your spell level, and it has to do in part with where you wind up on the map. Also, the mushroom scale, that difficulty scale, which is going to reset at the end of each night phase. You're also checking how many goblins you've killed. The more goblins, the more points you're going to score. And then you're also checking how many quests you've completed. So there are 2 types of quests. There are movement quests and there are item quests. The item quests you get if you complete a certain temple, it's going to give you an item. And what's really cool is you get to take that item and put it on one of your meeples, which have these little holes, and the items have these little nubs that fit perfectly in, and it gives that particular meeple some special ability. Now, there's also the movement quests that want your adventurers arranged in a certain pattern, or they want all of them on a certain type of action space or whatever. And that's going to give you usually an increase in health or an increase in power. Now, additionally, every time you complete 2 particular temples, and there are 6 different types of temples, and you complete them in a certain order, you're going to gain a legendary item, which you can equip your heroes with. There's a sword, there's a shield, and there's a magician's staff or whatever. Gives you some other cool special abilities, and they're worth 4 points at the end of the game. Yeah, so I think that's kind of the long and short of it, Alex. So I think we'll kind of dive a little deeper into some of the particular mechanics. We didn't really talk about power. Power is kind of a luck mitigation factor that certainly has some uses. But yeah, what do you think of Tiny Epic Quest? General first impressions.
I'm kind of conflicted on this, and as I'm talking through the review, I think my thoughts are going to settle a little bit more. So what's interesting is we covered the player ranges with this one, Sean, but in very different ways. I played this solo and at 4 players. You played it 1, 2, and 3, correct?
Correct.
So, yeah. What I will say is there are so many moments in the design of this game, whether it be components or the mechanics of it, that I will say that is straight up brilliant. It's really clever. Well done. And I find that with a lot of Scott Almes games. There's usually a moment or two where I think, man, that's really clever how they did that. Man, that's really smart how they did that. I love how they were efficient with this. This game is no exception to that. By the same token, there are also some things that occur in both the components and mechanics of this game that had me a bit frustrated. That had me on the opposite side of it, like, oh man, this actually kind of bugged me a little bit. And I think the good outweighs the bad. I do find myself a little conflicted with the game as a whole, though. More so than I have been with any of the other Tiny Epic games. those are the initial thoughts.
Okay. Yeah, so I played it initially solo, and I think there was a bit of a learning curve because there are a lot of options. The other thing I didn't talk about was there are certain immediate action spots that might give you more hearts or more power, spots that might let you move another one of your meeples again, spots that might let you advance a meeple that's already on a temple track, for example.
Right. Yeah, the grotto spaces.
Right. So between trying to go to different quest objectives in terms of trying to arrange your meeples in a certain movement pattern, or trying to make sure you get the correct temples and making sure that you're doing a little bit of everything, right? It can be a little overwhelming. And I think my first solo play, I was a little bit overwhelmed, and I wasn't crazy about it after that initial solo play. Played it again at 2 and again at 3, and I came around I think a decent amount. I really came to enjoy this game a lot more than I thought I was after that first solo play. After that first solo play, I was like, oh boy, this is going to be rough. But no. So I'm glad I gave it the shot because, we're trying to review this game. Unfortunately, never did get a chance to play a 4-player game, and hopefully you'll be able to kind of talk a little bit about that. But ultimately, it did a lot of things that I liked. There's a certain puzzly aspect to it. The press your luck it's there, but it's not always as tense as I would want a press your luck game to be. Like, certainly there are times when you're like, cool, I did everything I need to do. I'm totally out of the dice rolling. Because basically, you continue to take turns rolling the dice until you decide to rest. Once you rest, you're not affected by any of the dice. You can't advance your meeples. You can't take damage, anything like that. So a lot that I did like about this. I'm going to like this more than some of the other Tiny Epic games. I'm going to like this less than, say, Galaxies, which is my favorite of the series. But definitely some interesting choices to make in this game.
Let's start with rulebook, Sean, and I can go first with this one because I actually had to teach myself the game.
Oh boy.
A couple of different ways and a couple of different times, and what I'll say is I think for the most part the rulebook is actually pretty solid. It has good graphical examples, good iconography. The one thing I found, though, is that there were a couple of instances, corner cases mostly, where it was not covered. I was able to kind of figure it out later by going online. For instance, what happens if you complete a temple and there are 2 items of the same type for that temple?
You only get one.
The fire temple, and 2 fire temple cards are up.
Yeah.
You pick one, and you take one. Yeah. I couldn't specifically find that covered exactly in the rulebook. It may have been. I had a hard time finding it, which says something. There were instances where I was a little bit slow to find things, but in general, I think it's actually a pretty good rulebook. I think you could pretty well learn this game from the rulebook. I don't know what your experience was of it, Sean.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a really solid rulebook. I was able to. So I read it. I also watched Rodney's video, which is always helpful. But after reading the rule book, I mean, it was pretty clear to me. And I kind of watched Rodney's video on fast speed because I wasn't actually trying to learn it from him, just trying to kind of reinforce it after I'd already read it. But yeah, I think it's a solid rule book.
Go pledge your support for Rodney now on Indiegogo. This podcast brought to you by Rodney Smith of Watch It Played. Rodney Smith, he's way more famous than us.
But not really. Well, no, sorry.
What? No, that last part.
He is way more famous, but, and let's not even say, oh man, anyway, yes, I meant not really as in not really sponsored by Rodney Smith.
Oh, yes, that's fair. Anyway, so that's rulebook. Components art, Sean.
So you said you had some components issues with this.
A couple of them.
All right, let's hear them.
Okay. So what I will say, let me start with the positives, because I think there's also a lot of positives with this too.
And real quick, are you playing with the deluxe version or the standard version?
Kickstarter Deluxe Edition.
Yes.
So this may vary depending on what version of this you are playing with. But yeah, I backed this on Kickstarter. I have the Kickstarter fulfilled version, which I don't know how they crammed everything into the box cleanly. They somehow did, because it was nicely packed. Because as soon as I unwrapped and kind of redid everything, I cannot get it to fit in there for the life of me. That shows you, I think, just how much game they tried to cram in there, because you have the mini expansion in there as well. Sean's laughing a little bit.
I think that actually describes your lack of organizational skills.
Yeah, that's fair.
No one's had any issue with that but you. But go on.
Anyway, it does fit in there as in the box closes on top of it. It just doesn't sit as flush as it does with other people. But again, I think that's an Alex problem, not a true game problem. So some cool things they did. They always have something clever in these games, in these Tiny Epic games, that makes the most use of the space. One of the things they did with this is on the inside lip of the box, they have the end game scoring. because you score for sets. So, for instance, if you have 0 spell level, you'll lose 4 points at the end of the game. But if you have 10 spell level, you'll gain 16 points at the end of the game. They have all of that spelled out in a handy-dandy little chart on both sides of the inside of the box, which I think is always really cool when you can remind people exactly what you're going for, exactly how things score. The cards themselves for the Tiny Epic questing, the map cards, solid quality, and they're double-sided, so you can use a standard mode and sort of a more advanced night mode. The little widgets, so you have these really adorable little hearts that serve as health tracker, cool Triforce-esque power tokens. The item meeples are nice and solid. They hold the items well, and it looks kind of cool when they're actually holding the items. Let's get to some of the challenging pieces of this one for me. Sean, I don't know if this comes in the retail version of this, the item rack. This was mentioned actually by Jeremy on the Guild. Did you set up the item rack and use the item rack as it was in there?
I set up the first time, and then I didn't set it up any times after that. It's definitely cool. So it looks, and it's definitely thematic, right? It looks like a weapons rack that you'd see in, medieval movies, TV shows, whatever, and with just you put all the items in it. And it was cool, but it was a little fiddly to kind of set up, and it was easier just to lay out all of the different items, which is what we did.
Yep. And that's effectively what we ended up doing in all the plays I had of this one. Because as cool as it is conceptually, it wasn't something that added. Now, to be fair, that's not worth dinging the game for, really. The trick that I would have sometimes with this one, Sean, was reading the map cards, specifically when I'm talking about reading the map cards for spell locations.
Oh, yeah. Big time.
And good. I'm glad this isn't just me saying this. So, for folks who don't know, I have kind of pretty bad eyes. I took a hockey puck to my right eye when I was in college and had to have cataract surgery. I can't really read stuff up close with the right eye, and the left eye, if it's tired, can sometimes struggle with that too. So, some of the tiny text, which makes sense, it's a tiny epic game, was tough. With the spells, you need to find exactly where those are on the board because you can only go to certain spells at certain times to increase your spell level. And man, I had a hard time finding and identifying. Some of these just looked too similar, and it was tricky for me to pick out and easy enough for me to screw it up. And it hindered the game, unfortunately. It hindered how I would play the game because it slowed things down, made it trickier to play, made it less enjoyable to play. So that was a components struggle I ran into with that.
Yeah, so the spell icons are different colors and then different animal shapes. And so, for example, the scorpion and the crab kind of look similar. What I thought was kind of a missed opportunity, the different animals and the different colors the colors are kind of random, right? I thought it would have made more sense to color them in a sort of a banding way so that the lower level were a particular type of color, like different shades of blue, maybe, or green, and then yellow for the middle ones, and then red for the harder ones. Different shades in there, because a lot of times you'd look at a symbol on the board and be like, "Oh, that's a dolphin. Where is the dolphin? Oh, it's in the middle. Never mind." Whereas it would have been a lot quicker to just be like, "Cool, I'm really only eligible for the greenish colored ones right now." That would have been easier. But instead, there are different random assortment of colors with no rhyme or reason for why they were there. So yeah, I thought that was a little difficult as well. And I would say that overall, it was a pretty busy looking board. You take an individual tile and it looks cool. It looks really good. The art is, I think, excellent. But as a whole, it was really busy, and you really had to kind of spend some time to sift through all of the clutter on the board to figure out what you're trying to find.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you there. I had a tricky time with that. The other component thing that bugged me a little bit, less so than it might in any other game, was the, at least in the deluxe version, for the max hearts and max power. Those are individual little kind of deltas. Not deltas, but there's some word for it.
Yeah, the little arrow
chevrons.
things.
They're kind of chevron-y type of things. And they don't really fit anywhere on your player board all that well, and they're easily bumpable. There's nothing really locking them in. Now, the one thing with this is it's so easy to audit where your max of something should be. If it's goblins, it's 6 plus the number of goblins you've killed. If it's power, it's 3 plus your spell level. easy enough to figure out. It just was like a little annoying thing that those things could get bumped and knocked around easily enough. It's something that we've talked about as being an issue with something like, say, Terraforming Mars, and it's definitely there too. The difference between this and Terraforming Mars is Terraforming Mars, there's no way of really auditing and tracking that so well exactly where you were. This one, there's an absolutely easy way of doing that. So it's less of a problem in my mind for that. Sean, as far as the art look and the art style of this, you mentioned generally looks a little busy, but otherwise, did you find it fairly enjoyable? Did you like it?
Yeah, no, I thought it was great. Like I said, if you're focusing on an individual card, the different temples, the different obelisks are all a little bit different. I think it looks really cool, but it's just a lot to kind of parse through. As far as the component quality, the different cards, the quest cards, nice linen finish, the movement cards same. You've got these nice tile cards for the map, also linen finish. I thought it was a fantastic production, all those things considered. And of course, I mean, the item meeples are where it's at, right? These are these little plastic meeples, the little holes, and all of the items have these nubs. Like you said, it just looked really cool. You put your sword and shield on a guy, and this meeple is transformed into something else. It's really neat. I really like that, and it's just really a clever use of components, I think.
I'm excited to see how they implement that in future games, because it's not the last time we've seen item meeples.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely.
I think they've been clear it's not.
Yeah, definitely not.
So that's components art. Gameplay innovation. Sean, did you have fun playing this game?
Yeah, I did. Not the solo play, but I think I can go back and try it again solo now that it doesn't seem so overwhelming. My first solo play, I did so bad. I scored 8 points.
Oh.
And yeah, super bad. And just so you know, kind of the low level score they want you to aim for is 40.
Yeah.
I was nowhere close to that. What'd you score solo?
I scored 48 and 44.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. All right. You played solo.
I'd done it the same night that I played it at 4 players.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so I think in my in one of my 2-player games, I'd scored like 22, and then eventually I scored like 46, 48. So definitely it's about learning some efficiencies, I think, and kind of comboing some things together. There's some timing effects. I mean, if you're competing with someone on a temple track and there's a particular quest card, it's worth trying to beat them to it, because only one of you can really get that quest card, even if you both are able to complete the temple track. So there's definitely some efficiencies here, and it took me a game, really, maybe a game or two, to really wrap my head around those efficiencies. But I think I referred to it earlier as an interesting puzzle, and I would definitely, I think that's a good way to describe it, because it is very much a puzzly game. There are those 3 tracks that we talk about, or the scoring, right? Scoring for the number of goblins you've defeated, scoring for the number of quests you completed, and then scoring for the your spell level.
And legendary items you've acquired.
Right. But I'm talking about just the 3
Sure.
the 3 tracks, right?
Yep.
So what's interesting is if you go all the way to level 10 on your spells, it's worth 16 points. If you complete 10 quests, it's worth almost double that, 30 points. If you manage to kill 10 goblins, it's worth 35 points. And so I think that you need to be aware of kind of what's prioritized, right? I mean, certainly you can't ignore the spells, because the spells also have the most negative points associated with them if you just completely ignore the spells. In fact, you don't start scoring points for your spells until you're at level 3. And by the way, and I was kind of disappointed about this at first, because it talked about, you've learned a new spell level. I'm like, ooh, a new spell. What do I get now? Well, no, it's just a number.
Your power increases.
Your power increases, sure. I thought it was going to be some sort of special ability, but the special abilities are really reserved for the items, which is fine, which is fair. But you can't ignore spells, but you're also not going to necessarily score a ton of points off spells. It's definitely nice to have an increased power, because there comes a certain point early on when every time you're rolling power, you're like, well, shoot, I'm already maxed out, and I'm just wasting this free power that the game is trying to give me here.
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. So what I think is interesting is there are so many pieces of this game, Sean, that shine at higher player counts. And for me, I like this at 3 or 4. I don't know if I'd like it so much at 2, and I definitely didn't like it at 1. because I think a lot of what makes this game special are things you mentioned. This sort of race against other people to complete a quest before someone else does, to move your people into proper position and puzzle it out and do your best, not only to complete the quest, but make sure you have your guys in the right position for when the night phase hits, so you can then learn spells if you want to, or get through temples to get those items, or battle goblins, wherever you need to be, while doing that, while at the same time trying to complete quests, while at the same time trying to make sure you have enough health and power, is an interesting puzzle that interlocks in a cool way. And it's a puzzle that I think works best when you have a higher player count, when you're actually competing with someone to try and beat them there first. And it plays out in the pressure luck thing, for instance. If you both get to the end of a temple track at the same time and there's a quest associated with that temple, complete the fire temple, get this item, whoever rests first will complete that. And there may be other things you need to do on that night phase, like beat up a goblin or learn a spell that you won't do because you're trying to rest first. It lends itself to some really interesting decisions, and I like that piece of the game. I like how it implements the puzzle. I like that pressure luck, how it sort of has this splash damage. So if you roll 3 goblin attacks, for instance, it hits the first person, then the next person up, then the third person up, or groups in different ways. And there's things you can do yourself to mitigate that damage coming to you. I don't know. There's a lot of cool ways in how that interacts. I found, in general, the interplay between those two phases a really well done piece by Scott Almes in this game.
Yeah. Did you feel that the day phase where you're doing the movement kind of bogged down?
It can definitely get into a little bit of AP, but I didn't find it to be game breaking. Okay.
Yeah, I found it, especially at 3 players, to get bogged down a little bit. And you're saying at 4, not game breaking. Certainly, there's a hard decision of, okay, which movement card am I picking when it's my turn? And then which movement card, or rather, this other player picked this movement card. Now I have to move this way. Well, it's going to be my choice next, or my choice has already come, and I'm really trying to set this up. I liked it. I liked how it chose that particular selection of movement, but it also kind of could bog the game down. Now, once you're actually in the night phase and you're doing the press your luck, it definitely speeds up there quite a bit. And I think that was really my favorite part, especially when, let's say that, we're playing 3 players and Alex, you've completed your thing. The mushroom track has moved up to the second or third level, where now every damage rolled is dealing like 2 points of damage, or then eventually 3 points of damage. And if you're maxed out on the mushroom track, every mushroom that gets dealt is going to be dealing damage as well. And you're like, man, I really need to do these last 2 points of damage to this goblin, or I really need to complete this track. But now it's just me. Like, let's say you dropped out, someone else dropped out. So if I roll, just 2 goblins, normally someone else would soak that second one, but now I'm taking both of them, plus I'm taking the mushroom damage. So that can be pretty tough, but I like that. I like that push your luck element. But sometimes I felt like there were night phases that were just pretty easy. I don't know if you thought that too, but part of that's also depending on where you were. Like, for example, if you have 2 meeples on a torch temple track and a scroll temple track, and you have a meeple on fight a goblin, for example, you're making use of all 3 of those types of dice rolls. But you're looking for a lot of different things, and that cost can kind of add up. But that's where the mitigation comes in. So like the power can let you delve deeper. So you could spend 2 power to basically give you an extra torch or an extra scroll, or you could spend 2 power to negate damage coming at you. So there's some nice mitigation there. And then once you have earned certain weapons, or certain items rather, there's some other mitigation. So for example, if you're able to get your legendary sword, you can now spend power to deal damage to goblins. That's pretty cool. There's a temple goal, an item goal, or a quest, where it's a bow and arrow, and you can actually shoot goblins on adjacent cards. That's pretty cool. So there's a lot of cool stuff here, and I think that's going to add to the variability when you're using different items in conjunction with other items in different ways. So yeah, I thought it was pretty cool.
Now, what I will say is, at 4 players, we did burn through pretty much the entire quest deck.
Oh, wow.
Which was a bit of a bummer, because you want to have good variability in that quest deck. And I also understand that if you have only so many items, you don't want to make it so rare that any given item would appear. It definitely stretched the game at 4 players in that way. So that was weird. And then also we couldn't refill goblins for the final turn that we were playing because enough of them had been killed by enough players. So those are some of the things that kind of showed the game getting stretched at 4 players. Although I think it in some ways works best because that pressure luck element of things is most interesting at that count. Because, as you mentioned, everyone can benefit from certain roles, whether it's goblin punches or scrolls or torches. It's a collective thing. The reason it doesn't work for me so well at solo and why I think I'd have a hard time at 2 players with this one is there's mitigation in that turn order and that not everything is going to affect you at all times. And that decision of staying in or not feels more rewarding. When you're playing solo, it's, well, the dice worked really well and rolled fine, or they didn't. But whatever, if you get bad rolls in that night phase as a group of 4, it kind of hurts everyone. Not necessarily equally, but it at least hurts everyone.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, in your mind, did this live up to the theme?
So, the interesting things with Scott Alm's games is they feel really mechanically satisfying, and they feel like they fit the theme in some ways. But in terms of being truly, like, immersively thematic, I don't know if I ever got there with this one, Sean. And I think this is another case of suffering in comparison. Not a similar game in some ways. In other ways, maybe. In Near and Far, I would rather play Near and Far and get immersed in the story and world of Near and Far any day over the world setup in this game. Are they meant to do the same thing? No. Near and Far is far more of a storytelling game. This is not. But even in games like this, you can still kind of find ways of telling stories through the game, and I didn't really find myself doing that. I found it as a mechanical achievement with a theme that fit, but didn't feel totally integrated. And I guess a couple of the examples I'll give for that, Sean, one of them would be when you roll an attack during the night phase that damages you, period, regardless of whether you're fighting a goblin or not, it's a goblin face.
Mm-hmm.
If it were a punch symbol or a pow symbol or something else, there were situations where other players at the table were asking, oh, do I have to be fighting a goblin to take that damage? Well, no, it just kind of affects everyone. Does this hero have to get this item? Well, no, not necessarily. And why does having them be in formation necessarily have them complete this quest, which has a thematic name, but not necessarily a thematic purpose? So I get what they're trying to do in a lot of cases. It just never... It didn't have that feel to me of adventuring and going out and exploring. That being said, to go back to gameplay, I thought the card selection mechanic, how you moved in this game, was really cool. That sort of that movement drafting. So I love the mechanics of this game in a large part, and I didn't feel as immersed in the theme as I maybe would have liked to. And that seems weird to say, but that's where I fell on this one, Sean. I don't know where you are with theme.
Well, let's look at the theme here. So from the rulebook, the prologue says, a world at peace has been torn apart by the opening of chasms across the land. Goblins spew forth from the underworld, pouring into the sacred mushroom grottos and destroying eons of ancient knowledge and magic. To end this, you must venture forth on an epic quest. So you're saying epic, not so much.
It didn't feel like it to me. And I felt a lot of satisfaction through the gameplay of this. It just didn't feel like some grand epic journey, if that makes sense.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. And I think for the most part, I would agree with you. There was certainly more shouting. Like I remember shouting for certain dice to be rolled, certain faces to be rolled and things like that.
Absolutely.
There were times, like a couple times I actually had an adventure with a key, which lets you move a space in when you first go into a temple. And that felt pretty thematically connected. All of the items were very thematically connected, but I agree. As far as an immersive experience, I wouldn't necessarily call it that. So, hey, Alex, did the guild have anything to say about Tiny Epic Quest?
Quite a bit, and they actually seem to be in general a little higher on this one than we are, if I'm guessing. So, Jeremy Wright says, I dig Tiny Epic Quest. I'm a big fan of the push your luck element to the adventuring, and I really like how the dice apply to everyone at the table who hasn't rested yet. The item meeples have been a big hit, but I find the item rack cumbersome to actually use. I've only played 1 and 2 players, so I'd like to see how 3 and 4 feel before making a final statement. Anyone else try solo? I didn't even come close so far to the target scoring. Yeah, well, fair enough.
So BJ from Board Game Gumbo says, my favorite of the series so far is Tiny Epic Quest. Love the movement mechanic, love the questing, love the delicious decisions forced on you by the push your luck adventuring. 2 thumbs up so far.
Megan Naxer says, like many others here, I've only had the chance to play this with 2 players. I like it quite a bit, but it doesn't seem to be competitive enough at 2 for my tastes. It's too easy to go everywhere you want and begin the adventure phase with both players looking for the same stuff. I suspect I will like this more with 3 to 4 players, withholding a rating until trying it with more people.
And then Ben Ogden said, Quest was just amazing. The combination of sandboxy adventuring, the unique movement selection, and push your luck made this game a 6 on the Ducal scale for me. In fact, in the 3rd Dukeversary Top 10 contest, this one made it to number 7 for me. Love, love, love this game.
Ian Kissel says, Tiny Epic Quest is a pretty good puzzle game, but like eating a salad for dinner, I was left feeling unsatisfied when I was finished. The enemy meeples are cool, but there's not enough there to make me want to play it again. So, mostly positive, not universal, but mostly fairly positive on the guild. Sean, I'm going to ask you 2 questions here. Your final thoughts and rating, and where this stacks up in the series for you.
Okay, so I can tell you now where it stacks up. I have played everything in the series except for Defenders. I would say that Galaxies is my favorite. Then I would put... I think I would put this as my second favorite, and then Kingdoms, and then Western. Am I missing something? Or is that everything?
I'm actually pulling up a page with all of them listed so I don't forget any right now.
Yeah, so, yeah.
Kingdoms? Did you mention Kingdoms?
I mentioned Kingdoms. Kingdoms is my 3rd favorite of all of them. So,
now you got them all in there.
Okay, so yeah, it goes Galaxies, and I still have the Into the Black expansion, still haven't played. I really like Galaxies. I think Galaxies is a really solid game. Then this, then Kingdoms, and then Western. And I really did not care for Western. So that's where it stacks up. Now, I'm kind of having some difficulty here. My question for me, you asked me some questions. Here's my question for me. How often am I going to pull this game out? Because it's not a pure press your luck game. I mean, if I'm looking for, a tough press your luck experience, there are some other games that are going to kind of, scratch that particular itch. The movement stuff kind of got bogged down for me. I'm somewhere between a 3 and a 4. And by the way, we work on a 6-point scale here. A 1 is poorly designed but playable, not necessarily fun, whereas a 6 is an all-time favorite that's a contender for the top 10. So I'm stuck between game is okay, not exciting, will play in the right situation, versus 4, which is a good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy. And Alex, every time I give you crap for wanting to give a decimal, I feel like I'm not going to do it. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it, Alex. Calm down. I'm just saying, part of me wants to give it a decimal. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give it a 4. A good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy. It's going to stay in the collection. I'm worried that I'm not going to think to bring it out, though. And so it's possible that it could definitely fall to a 3. I definitely enjoyed my subsequent plays more than the solo play. There's the mushroom expansion that I'm eager to play. And I'm curious to see more interactions between the different items. So it's a 4, but a very tentative 4 right now. Good game worth playing, just not all the time, but belongs in the duchy.
Got it. So I'm going to give my ranking first, too, because I think that's interesting. I have yet to play Kingdoms or Quest. I've yet to play Quest doesn't... That's the one we just... Man. Wow.
Oh, man.
That's the one we
You're
literally
reviewing this
just
game
reviewed.
off of no plays? That's questionable.
I meant to say Defenders. I have not played Defenders or Kingdoms. I have played Galaxies, Western, and Quest. And out of those, I would rank them Western... No. Hang on. I would rank it Galaxies, Western, Quest.
That's just wrong. That's just wrong. But go on.
No. I agree with you. Tiny Epic Galaxies is amazing and my favorite really in the series for sure. I think a fantastic job on that game all around. Beautiful. Have played it several times since first trying it. Really, really like Tiny Epic Galaxies. Really like Tiny Epic Western and found it innovative and a lot of fun. I know you're not as much of a fan of that. I dug it. Still dig it. And Quest, I like it a lot, and it just kind of falls a little bit shy of the 2 of those. So, in thinking about this one, Sean, I can appreciate a lot of the brilliance that's here. when I think about the level of fun I had, it actually notches it down just a bit. I got a good amount of enjoyment of some of the pressure luck pieces of things, but it didn't totally gel together for me for whatever reason. Ultimately, though, I think the Tiny Epic series benefits from one thing: collectability. The gotta catch 'em all component of it. The fact that Scott Alms, as he mentioned in my interview, is going to try and have a Tiny Epic game for every letter of the alphabet. And wouldn't it be cool to have all 26 of those sitting on your shelf? Even me, as a non-acquisition disorder type person, kind of thinks that's something I want.
We'll get cracking. Buy the other ones.
Well, I got 2 more to catch up on. And, in Galaxy, so 3. I got 3 of them, and expansions. Anyway, so that helps actually boost it. So I was considering a 3. I don't think I was ever going to go there, but I definitely, it creeped into my mind a little bit. It settles, I think, much more clearly at a 4. A good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the Duchy. Because I'm not going to get rid of this, Sean. I own a copy. I have no desire to trade it away, sell it, whatever the case may be. I'd like to keep it. I think it's a cool experience and a really brilliant design. And it just isn't something I enjoy at the level of the design is brilliant, if that makes any degree of sense.
Sure, I think so.
So, yeah, that's Tiny Epic Quest. You heard from the guild, you heard from us, but the ultimate verdict on this one, Sean gives this one a 4, and I give this one a 4. Check this one out if it sounds interesting.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. For other great shows in the network, check out dicetowernetwork.com. Back to Alex and Sean for this week's Dukes Double-Take.
All right, this week, Sean, the first of, well, it'll probably be at least a few over the course of the next year, Sextuple Takes. That's right, 3 games for the price of 1 we are looking back at. Sean, first 2 we're going to look at kind of came in the same episode, from Plum and Plumber, named by BJ from Board Game Gumbo back in the day. And let's talk about Castles of Burgundy, the card game first. Sean, at the time, you gave this one a 4. And in your mind, it just suffered in comparison to the board game and said, in a vacuum, I'd rate this thing higher, probably. That mechanically you thought it maybe deserved to be higher than you were giving it credit for, but it just suffered from the comparison. For me, I said it was a 5. Not as good as the board game, but I'd be more likely to get it to the table if I owned it. Sean, where are you at a year down the line on this one?
So yeah, I gave it a 4. And so for point of reference, last night I played Castles of Burgundy. We had two new members over at the Dukes Dice Wednesday game night, and they were kind of newer gamers. They said, we played Catan, we played Ticket to Ride. And so Curtis and I were like, okay, we're going to blow your minds. And we brought out Castles of Burgundy. And Castles of Burgundy is my number 2 game, 3 game, somewhere in the top 5. Somewhere in the top 5 this last time around. I love it. I think it's fantastic. The card game was good. It was fine. It was fine. But certainly that comparison hurts it. And when you consider they take up about the same amount of table space, there's not necessarily a lot of aha moments I had with the card game. And looking back now, if this weren't a Feld, and if Raquel wouldn't beat me up for getting rid of it, I would probably get rid of this game. I haven't brought it out. I've had no desire to bring it out. I know that the benefit to this is there's a solo mode, but I'm not even really that interested in playing this game solo. So I'm going to drop it down to a 3. So from a 4 to a 3 is, game is okay. Not exciting. We'll play in the right situation. That pause you just heard was me like, wait, does this get a 2? No, I'm going to keep it at a 3 for now. Game is okay, not exciting. We'll play in the right situation.
I see no reason for me to move this anywhere. What I loved so much about it was it distilled the essence of Castles of Burgundy, the board game, and did a great job of translating into a card game in a way that was still fun and enjoyable. And at a price point that, quite frankly, was ludicrously cheap, and probably still is. I haven't looked into what that cost is. And I probably should buy it, even though I haven't yet. I think it's brilliantly done, and I think the mechanics are super solid. It's going to stay at a 5 for me. A great game. We'll rarely turn down a play of it. I haven't had a chance to turn down a play of it because no one's offered, but if someone did, I don't think I'd turn down a play of it because it's super cool. And I think, again, I'm going to get this out more readily or more easily than I would the actual board game. Even though, again, the board game made my top 10 as well, and I agree with you. It's fantastic. How do the new players like it, by the way?
They liked it quite a bit. I mean, it was certainly overwhelming at first because there's just so many options. But as the game progressed and as options kind of solidified in their mind, they really enjoyed it. At least that's what they told me. Who knows? They could be lying.
So we had a couple of guild thoughts. Daniel Newman said, I liked Castles of Burgundy, the card game, well enough, but ultimately it didn't stand out enough from the original. And if I'm going to reach for Castles of Burgundy, it's going to be the original for me. I traded this out of my collection recently, which pretty much echoes your thoughts on this one, Sean.
Absolutely. He doesn't have a Raquel there to whip him back into shape.
Yep.
So Megan Axer said, I enjoyed this more than I thought I would. In fact, if given the option, I'd probably vote for this over the regular Castles of Burgundy. I've still only had one play of it, probably about a year ago, maybe a little less, but I'd play again.
So more echoing my thoughts on this one.
And boo. Boo to you both. And by both, I mean Megan and Alex.
Why are you rooting against this now? I'm so confused. Anyway, so that's Castles of Burgundy, the card game. Basically, goes from a 4 to a 3 for Sean and stays right where it is at a 5 for me. Next up is Plums from the now defunct Crash of Games. Sean, at the time, you gave this one a 5. I'm going to keep this one accessible, was sort of one you said. It was one of your favorite trick takers at the time. I said 4. Does a lot of things well, just wasn't super memorable. Sean, have you been playing a lot of Plums since?
You know, I haven't. And it's a game that I've actually thought quite a bit about. It's in my small box collection area, which used to be in these little red boxes, and I tend to forget about the games that are in there. I've since bought these organizers that put them in my Calyx shelves so I can actually see them and remember what's in there. And so I'm curious how that's going to affect the small box games that I want to play. So this was originally Pie Mouth Flaumen and was brought over as Plums. I think I had said, and if I didn't say that, I'm saying it now, it's sort of a trick-taking game. I mean, you're playing tricks, but it's not trick-taking in the typical sense. There's a bit of a set collection to it. And it's certainly some interesting decisions because the card that you play will affect the order in which you're going to select from all of the cards that have been played out in that trick, which you're able to add to your tableau. And what's really cool is you can get these pie cards, not delicious pie, but 3.14 pie, which you can then play out to kind of add to the value of the cards that you're playing out into the trick. And that's really clever. So I think what I'm going to do here is I gave it a 5. I'm going to reduce it to a 4. A good game worth playing just all the time belongs in the Duchy. I think I like a game like Honshu better, which might be a reason why I'm kind of bringing this down. I think I might like a game like Jiraku better, which has kind of trick-taking, but not trick-taking, but then there's area control. And I hadn't played those games at the time. So I think it's going to fall to a 4, but I'm curious to see if I'm going to want to pull it out now that it's kind of more visible and more at the forefront of my mind. I think it's still a really solid game. Unfortunately, it's just really hard to get a hold of because Pie Mouth Flaumen was released over in Europe and then Plums is no longer available. So unless someone picks it up, it's kind of hard to get a hold of it. But I think it's definitely worth giving a shot.
For me, this one drops from a 4 to a 3. I think it's a solid game. It's not a memorable game for me. It's not one I'm going to turn to. It's not one I'm going to even think of. There are so many games that do things like it or close enough to it that I can't see a situation in which I'm going to bring it out. That doesn't mean the game itself is bad by any means. It's just one I don't care if it's in the Duchy or not, hence why belongs in the Duchy doesn't necessarily fit it for me.
So Ian Kissel over in the Guild said, this is a really fun set collection game, not a trick-taking game, that I think suffered from being a bit tricky to explain. It is a nice thinky card game, though that's not difficult once you have a round or two under your belt, and I hope that it makes its way back into print in the US soon.
Evan says, I own Pie Mouth Flaumen, and in my circles, it's turned out to be a very polarizing game. The fact that you can't play it as a 2-player game is a really limiting factor because once you get a group of 3 or more together, usually there's something more interesting that tends to hit the table, even if you're searching for options in the light filler category. For instance, my game group usually chooses Port Royal, Biblios, or Oh My Goods over this, and yeah, that's a pretty good list. I would pick any of those 3 over this as well.
Yeah, I would agree. That's a pretty solid list.
Plus, my hardcore gaming group finds Pie Mouth Flaumen too light and uninteresting, despite the fantastic art and production quality. And I'll agree, it was well produced and gorgeous, but I think it just got outshined in a lot of cases.
And then finally, Megan Naxter says, Pie Mouth Flaumen, gorgeous, fun, and thanks to a recent find on the shelf. A friend in our group had a copy of this that we got to play, and we fell in love. We're not classic trick-taking fans, but have recently enjoyed the cool variations on the format. It is easy enough to play with anyone, which makes it a rare game that is 3 or more players only and on our shelf.
So there you go. That's Plums, or Pie Mouth Flaumen. Goes from a 5 to a 4 for Sean, and a 4 to a 3 from me.
Okay, hold on.
Finally.
I gotta take a breath. Whew. All right, hold on. Whew. It's a lot of work, Alex. All right,
Hey,
let's do.
It's a 6 double-take. That's what happens when you go bi-weekly, Sean.
Yeah. All
That's
right.
the price you pay.
All right, I'm ready. I'm back in this.
Episode 107, Carmina Burano, where we reviewed Burano.
So yeah, originally, Alex, you gave it a 2. You said you were initially torn between a 2 and a 3, but you said because the teach was too long and because of a bunch of different component issues, it fell to a 2. By the way, a 2 is. By the way, a 2 is game has some merit, but has some significant issues. So I gave it a 3, which is game is okay, not exciting, while playing the right situation. And I said that, hey, look, if it were set up on the table, someone's like, hey, you want to come over and play Burano? I said, sure, I'd go ahead and play it. We were using the term Frankenfeld, which we've used before with a game like La Granja, where it felt like a Feld and it used a bunch of different, body pieces in the sense. That's why it's a Frankenstein's monster type thing, but with Feld components or Feld mechanics rather. And this game just didn't really pull it off. It did a lot of really interesting things. It was beautiful to look on the table. There were those component issues where you have these little chit discs, which you have to manipulate quite a lot. They're tiny. They're hard to pick up. I replaced them with some meeples, little tiny meeples. But yeah, no. So I gave it a 3 initially. And I got to tell you what, if the game were set up on a table and someone asked me to play it, I'd probably say, yeah, no thanks. I'm good. So in my mind, I'm going to give it a 2. Game has some merit, but has some significant issues.
Unleash the 2.
Yeah. So
I'm going to keep it at a 2 because I didn't dig this one so much, and I still don't think I'd dig it and still wouldn't play it, but I remember seeing that it had some redeeming qualities. So,
sure.
2. It stays at a 2.
So over the guild, Royce Calverley said, I enjoy it, especially at 3 or 4 players, but it feels like a bunch of mini games that don't really relate to each other. It's a high 3 for me.
Daniel Newman says, Burano was another disappointment for me. I love Felds, and this felt like it was aspiring to be one, but didn't quite land for me. Too fiddly and just not satisfying. This was also traded out of my collection recently. If you'll remember, he also said he got rid of Castles of Burgundy, the card game. So, yeah.
And for the most...
Pretty unified on this one, Sean.
Yeah, I think so. For the most part, Daniel Newman and I are pretty simpatico in terms of game preferences and things like that. And we've pretty much lined up on everything here tonight.
That was our Duke 6 double-take wrapped up by Burano, which goes from a 3 to a 2 for Sean and stays at a 2 for me.
So, Alex, you're kind of in an interesting position right now. You are in a new place, in a new city. You don't have the regular crowd at Empire. You don't have my place to come play games at. What kind of game table do you have that you could play games on?
Currently in this lovely one-bedroom loft apartment, I have a standard wood kitchen table. So not really much of a playing surface, and not a ton of space for a full-size table necessarily either. When I saw Game Toppers, and I've been seeing them at conventions, both Dice Tower Con and recently at Gen Con, it looked like the perfect thing to have for me. I'm someone who doesn't like a lot of big, bulky stuff, but I like something that provides a nice quality experience, and this definitely fits the bill, Sean.
So these game toppers are really cool, right? Because like you don't have a lot of room, but you can store these toppers and then put them on top of your regular old table in your home. And it's got this cool locking mechanism. It's got some 3M rubber grips on the bottom, so it's not going to slide around. It's going to stay secure on your table. You can even put a pretty decent amount of weight on one end of the table, and it's not going to come flipping up. So I think it's a really cool product. The quality on it is pretty excellent. And you've seen them, Alex, right?
Oh, yeah. I've seen them. I've played on them. I played my first play of The Godfather on one of these. And, for instance, the little card holders built into the lip was absolutely brilliant. Worked perfectly for that game. And I think would work perfectly for a lot of games.
And what's really cool is it's made of both wood and aluminum. So it's this kind of composite material, and it's got the nice wood finish that you come to expect in a high quality gaming accessory, but the aluminum helps keep the weight down. So it's easier to put on the table, to take down from the table, etc. And when this goes up on Kickstarter, you're going to have a lot of different options for different types of playmats, different thematic playmats, whether it's Starfields or for dungeon crawls or whatever. There's a bunch of accessories from Daedalus Productions, from Dogmite Games. Really cool stuff. There's going to be a lot of different packages for a bunch of different budgets. So definitely watch Kickstarter. And if you want to see some videos of what these look like, you can go on over to GameToppersLLC.com.
Game Toppers LLC, upgrading your gaming experience. All right, finally this fine evening, we are going to a guild discussion topic that some jerk named Alex Goldsmith posted on our guild during the off week. Oh yeah, that's me. And it was about publisher pet peeves. And it was a question about what are some things that publishers keep doing that annoy you, that outright annoy you. And let's be careful here, because now I'm in a glass house throwing stones. So we're not naming names as part of this in any way, form, or fashion.
I was going to say, is this like market research for you? Is that why you did this?
A little bit, kind of. Yeah, why not? Makes sense to me. So I thought it was interesting, some of the answers that people put out there. And a lot of this stuff makes total sense. Sean, I think the best way of approaching this is maybe going to see what the guild had to say first, and then we can kind of fill in stuff that's missing on the back half of this.
You are reading my mind, Alex. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Because we had a lot of good guild responses. So let's start this one off with Ron Graves. Ron says one of his pet peeves is publishers hyping the game by getting it into reviewers' hands, who, oddly enough, often give positive reviews to it, present company excluded. Thanks, Ron. Appreciate that. Then by the time most of us wake up, the game is unavailable. If you aren't someone who pre-orders almost everything, thankfully my game group has a couple of guys who do, then you have to wait for a second printing. Having said that, although I blame the publishers, I also understand why this happens. I don't think there's a way around it, but it's still the most annoying thing about the hobby. And yeah, I can totally get that. A lack of availability of a game, especially one that gets really hyped up, can be frustrating. I'm not someone who buys a lot of games, Sean, so I can't super identify with this, but I'm sure this was something that you ran into, that you have run into a bunch.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, for the most part, I'm right there buying the games as soon as they're available.
So you're that guy.
Well, yeah, or, we're sometimes asking for review copies of games and we get them through other channels and whatnot. But yeah, no, for the most part, I understand. I can understand that. And I think that in some ways in the past, that's what's created the fear for me that, I'm going to miss out on something. And I think that's a marketing ploy in a lot of ways. If someone's sitting on the fence, it's like, I'll just wait. I'll wait while it's in retail and I'll pick it up at some point. But no, if you don't pre-order, man, they're going to blow through that first print run and now you're waiting forever.
And part of it I get from the publisher side, now being on the publisher side, is you don't always know what the demand for a game is going to be. You don't always know how much hype is too hype or how hefty the demand for any given game is going to be. Some of them you can really predict. Anything Star Wars is probably going to sell a whole ton. And it's something that's more of an unknown, maybe from a lesser known designer, maybe has an odd theme to it or a mechanic that's been done. Who knows what the factor may be, but there's a lot of questions sometimes. And if you make too big of a print run right off the bat, you are putting yourself in a financially tricky position. So I totally get that, and I also, as someone who is now literally paid to hype games, also get the need from publishers to hype stuff up as much as humanly possible, and then wait for the second print run, and if it's sold out early, so be it. That's just the way it goes. I will say for the Dukes part of this, we tend to try and review stuff that is available whenever possible, as sort of a general philosophy.
Right, yeah, more often than not. Yeah. So Blaine Miley said his big pet peeve are useless inserts. Having an insert that makes setup and teardown more efficient is a reasonable ask. The insert is a component of the board game and should receive attention to detail, just like decisions on cardstock or meeple size. Poor inserts make setup and teardown a hassle, thus placing a barrier to getting the game to the table. Additionally, if there are planned definite expansions, it would be nice if the insert could accommodate them in some fashion. And certainly, Alex, I think you see when companies do give that attention to detail, like in the case of Mechs vs. Minions, I mean, they're applauded, right? The public loves it. It's fantastic. There's so many times it's frustrating where you have certain companies that just have a generic insert and stuff just goes wherever you can fit it. Other times when you have a nice insert, but there's no room for expansion content, as I'm a person that likes to put all my expansions in the main box if they can fit. So yeah, I certainly understand this particular pet peeve.
Yeah, and for me, usually I don't have games that require hefty inserts, and so it's not an issue I run into a ton, but I can definitely identify, certainly when a game has an insert that shines, it really shines. And makes setup and breakdown a breeze and is really cool and clever and interesting. And when thought is put there, I definitely notice it. So I can get how if you tend to play games that require a lot more setup and breakdown, that could become a problem or something you notice more often than not, and it could quickly grate on you. So I totally get where he's coming from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Paul Grogan, he said bad rule books are his pet peeve when they're not properly blind tested or edited, making the game hard to learn. Some these days are pretty shocking. Publishers should take more care and attention over these and give them the time and effort they need rather than focus on bling and advertising. I wish Paul had a solution though. You know what I mean?
I know, man.
I mean,
some service of some kind that people could pay money for to help.
Yeah,
fix
he's just
this
griping,
problem.
right? He's telling the problems. So what's the fix, Paul? What's the fix? Of course, giving Paul a hard time. He's from Gaming Rules, and he does excellent rulebook work, refining it and clarifying it. Paul's rulebooks are fantastic, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, because especially some of the heavier games that he attacks the rulebooks on. So, but definitely agree. There are you can tell when there has not been blind playtesting, because there's just so many rules that are kind of assumed or not fully spelled out. And it's because they're teaching it to people that they're working with or that they know, and it's not going out to blind playtesters. So there's not people that are going, well, wait, how is this supposed to work? Why is it this way? And is there some assumption here I should be making? So definitely something to consider.
No doubt about it. Andrew Capish says, when expansion content is intended to be integrated into the base game, but the publisher uses a printer who either doesn't stock or won't acquire the original substrate used for the base game components.
So let me make sure that's clear. Basically, he's saying when you have different types of card stock, or you have card backs where the color is off just slightly, that grinds my gears.
All right. I don't even need to read the rest of this, because that's basically the same thing. And yeah, Sean, you've already beat him to the punch. You are 100% on board for this. And I will say, for the one game that I have bought just about everything for, Baseball Highlights 2045, I remember seeing with one of the expansions, someone had posted somewhere that maybe some of the cards might be different in the expansion than they were in the base game. And I gotta tell you, I kind of freaked out about it a bit. I got genuinely worried. Now, when I finally got the product, no problem, it was all the same. But even the thought or the fear of that with a certain game, that had me a bit worried. So yeah, I can totally identify with this. It's something that can break gameplay, and yeah, it's a bummer, Sean.
And then he goes on to say, so when this happens, in his mind, the publisher either A, just didn't care enough to hold the printer to the previous standards, B, decided to settle for $1, or C, is completely oblivious to the entire thing. I think C is the most offensive to me. to be oblivious to it all, because I'm sure there are some out there. I mean, you take a game like Magic, right? You exclude alpha and beta, which, well, I guess just alpha, right? Because I think beta had normal, anyway, not important. Ever since then, the backs of the cards are virtually identical. And their publisher, Cardamundi, they've gone to just incredible lengths to make sure that there's uniformity there. And certainly understand that that's difficult from one print run to the next, or from printing the main game to an expansion. But it's definitely, I can appreciate it. And it's something that no one's ever going to sing your praises for, right? If you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, for the most part, no one's like, oh, good job, way to go. It's only when you've actually screwed up that people notice it. And we've had, I know publishers where they've said, oh, we'll just put them in opaque backed card sleeves. And it's like, no, come on. Like that's your issue. And anyway. So, man, I'm
passing the buck.
I'm getting a little hot under the collar here, Alex.
Man. All right. We touched a nerve with Sean. Ben Coberly says post-purchase support. Particularly if you have a complex game, you should be reaching out to people like Paul Grogan, Watch It Played, Heavy Cardboard, etc. to have videos that teach your game, have some gameplay, etc. I know those guys are busy and it's probably hard to nail them down to do it, but I think it's a market that could be expanded and would enhance sales a lot. The more people see your game played, the more excited they will be, and will take away some of the anxiety of learning a more complex game. And I totally agree with this, because when I am called upon as part of my ducal duties to learn a more complex game, boy, I am really happy when there is a Rodney Smith, now an Indiegogo, current sponsor of the Dukes of Dice, when there is one of those videos. But not actually. When there's one of those videos available so that I can properly learn the game. When that stuff is done right, it makes a play experience so much better, so much easier, and that's part of why I'm excited for some of the new ways that people are trying to make these games easier to learn, whether it be videos, app-based learning from that new app-based software called Dized, things along those lines. So I think it's something that publishers are more aware of and working on. And I think it's definitely something that should be a priority, especially if the game warrants it.
So Ian Kissel said small companies that need second editions for their games soon after release. And he kind of goes on to name some names. And for the most part, I mean, it's kind of annoying. It's kind of annoying. And there are some fantastic companies that have done this. Several companies that we've named earlier in the episode. But I think especially when they were smaller and younger, definitely a learning curve. But yeah, that can be kind of annoying. Even after like 10 years, I'm still annoyed by Twilight Imperium 3 turning into Twilight Imperium 4. I'm still annoyed by having last edition Sid Meier's Civilization and Fantasy Flight releases a new Civilization. I can call it Fantasy Flight. They're big enough they can handle the hit that we're delivering to them right now.
Sean, are you trying to get my employer killed here?
What were we? Actually wasn't referring to them.
No, I know you weren't.
Oh.
But you're picking a fight with Fantasy Flight, and I don't know, by proxy, we might get the whole weight of the Star Wars Fantasy Flight empire coming down upon us.
On Grey Fox? I'm so confused.
Okay, well, that was what I was trying to say. It was a joke, but it didn't go over. So, carry on.
So, yeah, I definitely understand that frustration. One of your all-time favorite games, or what used to be a favorite game, came out with like 4 editions in like a 3-year period. That is terrible. That's terrible, Alex. Puzzle Strike.
Oh, thank you. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And finally, good place to wrap up is Jeremy, Release the Two Right, who says, hey, what if we start a new thread of publisher preferences, things you like seeing in board games? I think positive feedback is probably more helpful in the hobby and helps publishers focus on developing practices that engage their customer base.
And so I think the irony shouldn't be lost there, that this call for positive reinforcement is coming from Jeremy, Release the Two Right.
Which, by the way, has worked. His pleas to release the 2 have definitely had an effect on more 2s being released. I think at one point he was saying he kind of regretted releasing the 2 because we had been going to it so often. He's
kind of like Oppenheimer and Einstein, who regretted unleashing nuclear power on the world because of the devastation it caused. So you're in good company, Jeremy. I guess, sort of.
Excellent. All right, we've already gone too long, but it kind of makes sense. We're still getting used to the bi-weekly stuff, so we'll get better at this. Sean, what was the rest of the top 6 names for this episode?
Certainly. Well, we had Steve O'Rourke, the name father, suggest Tiny Epic Pests because you're being pestered by some of these pet peeves. So that makes perfect sense.
And pestered by Burano. Matthew S. came with Plumbing the Depths, and Plum, Plum, so referencing Plums. The Depths could kind of be an exploring type of thing, dealing with things. Plumbing the Depths, referring to bad things in games, and there's probably something else he's referencing there that is not clicking with me because I'm a little tired.
Okay, so Striker J suggested Alms for the 4, and Alms is not spelled in the conventional way, but as in the game designer Scott Alms of Tiny Epic Quest fame. And we're talking about 4 different games, essentially. So, yeah, that makes sense, too.
I mean, more than 4, but yeah, 4 that we focused on, for sure.
Sure.
Blaine Miley with Tiny Things I Hate About You. Yeah, Tiny Epic Quest and the Pet Peeves. That makes sense.
And also, that's almost a Shakespeare reference. Almost.
Okay.
Do you get it? You get it?
I do.
Do you? Or are you just saying you do?
I'm just saying I do.
Please. So yeah, 10 Things I Hate About You, the movie with Heath Ledger, is based on Taming of the Shrew.
Oh, so I knew 10 Things I Hate About You. I didn't remember the connection between that and Shakespeare. So, excellent. BJ from Board Game Gumbo came with a diatribe called Quest. That was pretty good, and I think could have been a runner-up this week. I'm not sure.
Definitely.
We didn't really debate it.
Yeah, no, we're referencing the hip-hop group Tribe Called Quest, so that was very clever. Because we just had a lengthy diatribe against publishers.
Take that, board game publishers.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Bunch of jerks making awesome games.
Yeah, how dare they?
All right, Alex. Well, I think that's going to do it for this episode 158, which, again, we're calling Legend of Felda. Thanks again to Jimmy Marrow, Jimmy DM90 over on Board Game Geek. So, Alex, I guess have a great 2 weeks.
You too. You too.
Yes. It's a little weird, right? It's been weird.
It's definitely weird. I mean, you said hey, come check out the guild every week. And, well, we're going to try and have stuff up in the guild. And I think we have some tentative plans to have something up every week for the next few weeks, for sure. There's an interesting surprise coming down the pipe next week that hopefully people will like.
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, until next time, this is Sean.
And Alex.
And Duke you later.
Thank you so much for listening to the Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on September 7th, 2017. Our theme music is provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out dicetowernetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to dukesofdice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsors, Tasty Minstrel Games and Game Toppers. You can check out all of TMG's awesome titles at playtmg.com, and you can learn more about Game Toppers over at Toppers LLC.com. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, game on!